and human DNA testing.
Okay. Prior to your testing, was this swab that you signed out from Brenda Montpetit in your sole and continuous custody from the time you withdrew it to the time you tested it?
Yes.
And prior to conducting the testing, was the swab tampered with, altered, destroyed, or substituted in any way while it was in your custody and control?
No.
All right. Ms. Ameren, what were the results of the test that you performed on the swab designated as 5.105230Q1?
Screening for the presence of human blood was positive, and screening for the presence of human DNA was positive.
Were you able to obtain a DNA profile from this swab?
Yes.
And was this a single source or a mixture profile?
This was single source, so one contributor.
And what was the gender of the contributor?
Female.
And did you do any comparisons for this swab?
Yes.
So manual comparisons for swab 5105230.
Yes.
Next swab, Ms. Ameren. On March 31st, 2025, did you withdraw from the HPD evidence room a swab titled as stain from ground under bush, labeled as item number 6 under HPD report 25-110958?
Yes.
Okay. And then who did you sign that item out from?
Brenda Montpetit.
Was this item designated as lab control 6, parentheses 105230, and parentheses Q1?
Yes.
What kind of tests did you perform on this swab number 6?
Blood serology and human DNA testing.
Prior to your testing of this swab was from the time that you signed it out from Brenda Montpetit to the time you tested it. Was it in your swab? And were there any testing? Was the swab tampered with, altered, destroyed, or substituted in any way while it was in your sole custody and control?
No.
What were the results of the test that you performed on the swab designated as 6, parentheses 105230, and parentheses Q1?
Screening for the presence of human blood.
Was this
One was
next object? On March 31st, 2025, did you also withdraw from the evidence from a T-shirt labeled as recovered from the defendant that was submitted as item number 13 under HPD report 25-110958?
Yes.
Okay. And then who did you sign that item out from?
Brenda Montpetit.
Now, so far you've talked about swabs from Iraq. What's different about testing, doing DNA testing on a T-shirt?
For the T-shirt, I took cuttings from this item instead of swabs.
And how many samples or cuttings did you take from item 13, the T-shirt?
6.
And as part of your work, do you document the areas of the T-shirt that you take cuttings from?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach now with States Exhibit 134 and 135, previously shown to defense?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Ameren, I've just handed you what's been marked as States Exhibit 134 and 135. Do you recognize what I've just handed you?
Yes.
Okay, what are these?
These are the photos I took during the screening of the T-shirt.
And what do these photos show?
These show the front and the back of the T-shirt with stickers indicating the areas I sampled.
And do these photos fairly and accurately depict item 13, the T-shirt, and the locations of the shirt that you sampled for DNA on March 31st, 2025?
Yes.
At this point, the state moves to admit States 134 and 135 into evidence.
Mr. Otake. No objection. For identification of States Exhibit 134 and 135 swab we received into evidence.
And permission. All right, publishing now states exhibit 134. Okay, Miss Emmerich, I'm gonna hand you this iPad and you can use a little stylus on it. If you could explain and show us the areas that you tested on this photograph.
So this is the front of the t-shirt, and there are 4 different areas that I tested. I observed 4 stains. So the first stain is this one here. And that one is the stain on the exterior right armpit.
And I'm sorry, what was there a number assigned to that one?
Yes, this is 13-10530-Q1.
So that one is Q1 for the item number 13.
Yes.
Okay.
The second sample, Q2, is right there, and that is the stain on the exterior right chest.
Okay. And what Q number was this given?
Q2.
So using a short term, it would be item 13, Q2.
Yes.
Okay.
The third item, the third sample is there, and that is Q3. That is the exterior front bottom left.
Okay.
And Q4 is this last one here, which is the stain on the exterior front bottom right.
Okay. I'm going to walk up to the stand. I'm going to retrieve the iPad. I'm going to publish then states exhibit 135, and we'll do the same thing.
Okay.
All right, we have states exhibit 135 being published right now. Ms. Emmerich, could you explain to us and show us using the laser pointer function which areas you tested?
This is the back of the t-shirt, and there are 2 stains that I sampled. The first one is, it's not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ooh. Ooh. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. This stain on the top is the stain on the exterior top, back top.
Okay. And what number or Q number was this given?
That is Q5.
And is this still item 13?
Yes.
Okay, so can we call this 13Q5?
Yes.
Is it okay going forward that I take out that string of numbers that's your ID?
Sure.
Got it. Okay, and what is the other stain or the other sample that you took from the rear of the t-shirt?
The last sample was Q6, which is this stain here. And that is the exterior back center.
Okay. Ms. Everett, I'm going to retrieve the iPad from you now. All right, what kind of tests did you perform on those 6 samples from item number 13, the t-shirt?
I performed blood serology and human DNA testing.
Prior to your testing, did you take cuttings or swabs from this?
I took cuttings.
Got it. And how do you take the cuttings?
I use a scissors to cut a small piece of the fabric with the stain on it.
And prior to your testing, was item number 13 the t-shirt that you signed out from Brenda Montpetit? Was it in your sole and continuous custody from the time you withdrew it from her at the evidence room to the time that you tested it?
Yes.
Prior to conducting your testing, was the t-shirt tampered with, altered, destroyed in any way while it was in your custody and control?
No.
And were there to the tamper-proof seals on the evidence?
No.
All right. Miss Cameron, I'm actually going to put up States Exhibit 134. If we can start with Q1. I'm sorry, this is States Exhibit 135. Publishing 134. And we're going to zoom in on the areas. So for the area marked Q1, what were the results of your testing?
For Q on screening blood,
And for Q1, the stain on exterior right arm, was that a single source or multiple? And as it was a multiple source, did you testing on item number 13, Q2?
screening for the presence of human
Going on to Q number 3, the stain on the exterior front bottom, which is circling the here.
Yes. Yes.
Of your DNA testing with regards to the cutting from 13 to 3.
Screening for the presence of blood and human were positive.
And were you able to generate a DNA profile from the sample?
Yes.
Was it a single source profile? I'm sorry, how many contributors?
There were 2 contributors.
So not a single source profile?
No.
So as it was not a single source profile, did you I'm circling now on the screen. What were the results of your DNA and serological testing on that sample?
Screening for the presence of human blood and human DNA were positive.
And was that, or how many contributors?
For that sample, there were 2 contributors.
And because it was 2 contributors, was it a single source or a mixture?
It was a mixture.
And because it was a mixture, did you determine the gender of any contributors?
No.
Right. We're going to now publish States Exhibit 135. And I'm going to zoom in on where the samples was. I'm sorry. Okay. Ms. Emery, what were the results of your DNA and serological testing on Q5 listed as stain on exterior back top? And I'm highlighting the area now.
Screening for the presence of human blood and human DNA were positive.
Okay. Were you able to estimate a number of contributors?
Yes.
How many?
There were 2.
So was this a single source profile or a mixture?
It was a mixture.
And as it was a mixture, again, were you able to determine male or female?
No.
All right. And last sample for this piece of evidence, Ms. Emerin, looking at Q6. we have highlighted now. The stain on exterior back center. What was the results of your serological and DNA testing on this sample?
Screening for the presence of human blood and human DNA were positive.
And were you able to estimate a number of contributors?
Yes, there was one.
One contributor. Okay. Were you able to get a DNA profile?
Yes,
Okay. And were you able to determine the gender of that single contributor?
yes, it was female.
Okay, Ms. Amarin, but for item number 13, and that's Q1 through Q6, on the 6 samples, did you do any comparisons manually yourself for these samples?
For any single source DNA profile, I did manual comparisons, yes.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you said the single sources in this one were Q2, the stain on exterior right chest, and Q6, the stain on exterior back center. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay. Got it. I'm going to take exhibit 135 down for now. And we'll come back again in a few minutes to those comparisons. I'm going to move into the next section. Do you think now is appropriate for a break?
We could do it now. We could do it in about 10 minutes.
We'll go about 10 more minutes. Okay, sure. All right, Ms. Amarin, moving on a little bit to item number 14. On March 31st, 2025, did you also withdraw from the evidence room a pair of shorts recovered from the defendant labeled as item 14 under HPD report 25-110958?
yes.
Who did you sign those items out from?
Brenda Montpetit.
And overall, how many samples did you take from item number 14, the shorts?
I sampled 6 different areas.
And were these swabs or cuttings?
Cuttings.
As part of your work, did you document the areas of the shorts that you took the cuttings from?
Yes,
May I approach with what's been marked as exhibit 136, 137, and 138 previously shown to defense? I'm handing you what's been marked as exhibit 136, 137, 138. Before you look at those, could I take back 134 and 135? Thank you. Okay, Ms. Amarin, do you recognize what I've just handed you?
yes.
Okay, and what are these?
These are the photos I took of the shorts during my screening stage.
Do these photos also show the areas that you took the cuttings?
Yes,
Do these photos fairly and accurately depict item 14, the shorts, and the locations of the shorts that you tested for DNA and serology on March 31st, 2025?
yes.
At this point, the state moves exhibits 136 through 138, inclusive, into evidence.
Mr. Okay. No objection. What is the mark for identification of state exhibits 135, 136, 137, and 138 receiving evidence?
Okay, and permission to publish.
Granted.
Publishing 136 on the screen right now. Okay. Ms. Amarin, I've published dates 136 on the screen. I'm going to hand you the iPad with the pen, and if you could demonstrate, or if you could circle and show us where you took the cuttings from, as well as highlight it with the pen.
So this is the back of the shorts, and there's 2 stains that I sampled. The first one is the stain on exterior back center, which is this big stain here. And that's Q1, and Q2 is this stain here, which is the stain on exterior back right.
Okay. I'm going to approach and I'm going to put up the next exhibit and we'll do the same. Publishing now states 137. All right, could you demonstrate, Ms. Emmer, for us where you took cuttings on this photo?
So this is the inner pants of the shorts. And this stain here, which is stain on exterior of inner pants, Q3.
Okay. And that's the only stain in this photo?
That's the only new stain, yes.
Okay. And I'm going to approach and publish now states 138. Right. States 138 is now on the screen. Ms. Amarin, could you show us on this exhibit where you took cuttings for testing?
This is the front of the shorts, and there's 3 different areas I sampled. The first one is the stain on exterior top right, which is here. And that is Q4. The next stain is Q5, which is the stain on exterior front middle right, which is this one here. And Q6 is the stain on the exterior front left, which is here.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to retrieve the iPad from you now. And I'm going to remove states 138. Okay. Ms. Emery, what kind of tests did you perform? And overall, how many samples did you take from the shorts?
6.
Overall, what kind of tests did you perform on those 6 samples?
I performed human DNA testing and blood serology.
Prior to your testing of these shorts and the samples you took from them, from the time you signed them out from Brandon Montpetit, were they in your sole and continuous custody until you tested them?
Yes.
When you signed them out, were there any broken seals on the packages?
No.
And prior to conducting your testing, did you tamper with, alter, destroy, substitute in any way the shorts item number 14 or any of the samples?
No.
Okay. Ms. Amarin, we're going to walk through those 6 samples you took, and I'll ask you for each one of them what your results were and if you can explain, okay?
Yes.
All right. And then I'm going to publish so we can go along together with the photograph. So publishing now states exhibit 136. And for Q1, Ms. Amarin, you said that was the large stain in the center. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What were the results of your serology and human DNA testing for this sample?
Screening for the presence of human blood was negative, and no further testing was performed. So no DNA testing.
Got it. Okay. For Q2, which is the stain on exterior back right, which I'm circling at the top of the photo, what were the results of your serological and DNA testing?
Screening for the presence of human blood was negative. No further testing was performed.
So no DNA testing.
Yes, no DNA testing.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to publish now states exhibit number 137. And I'm going to, all right, 137 is on the screen. Circling the stain you indicated earlier on the bottom as Q3 stain on exterior of inner pants. What were your results of your DNA and serological testing for this sample?
Screening for the presence of human blood was negative. No further testing was performed.
So no DNA testing.
Yes, no DNA testing.
All right. And moving on to publish now states exhibit 138. The Q4 from item number 14, stain on exterior front top right, which I'm going to circle with the laser pointer right now. Am I circling the correct one?
Yes.
Okay. What were the results of your DNA and serological testing on item number 14Q4?
Screening for the presence of human blood and human DNA were positive.
Okay. Was this a single source sample or not?
Yes, it was a single source.
Okay. So because it was single source, did you then, be redundant, what was the number of contributors?
One contributor.
Okay. And was that contributor, were you able to determine the gender?
Yes, it was female.
Okay, moving on to item number 14, the shorts, Q5, stain on exterior front middle right. I'm circling on the screen. Have I circled the correct one?
Yes.
What were the results of your serological and DNA testing for this item?
Screening for the presence of human blood and human DNA were positive.
Were you able to determine a number of contributors?
Yes, one female contributor.
And then were you able to get a DNA profile from this as well?
Yes.
Okay, and cycling back to Q4, were you also able to generate a DNA profile from that sample?
Yes.
And our last sample for the shorts, item number 14, Q6, stain on exterior front left, which I'm circling. Did I circle the correct area?
Yes.
What were the results of your serological and DNA testing for this sample?
Screening for the presence of human blood and human DNA were positive.
Okay. Were you able to determine a number of contributors?
Yes, there were two.
Okay. And were you able to generate a DNA profile from this sample?
Yes.
And was this a single source or mixture?
A mixture of two people.
And as it was a mixture, did you determine the gender?
No.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to take States Exhibit 138 down. I think now before I move into the next topic would be a good time.
Be a good time for recess. So ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's take a 10-minute recess. Ms. Official will collect you shortly after 11. Keep it open, send a check. All right. versus Gerhardt Konig, 1 CPC -25-373. Mr. Konig is present in court with all four counsel of record. All jurors are back in the courtroom, and Ms. Michelle Amaranth on stand. So, Mr. Garner, you may continue.
Thank you. Before we jump back into swabs and results or tests, Ms. Amarin, I'm going to hand you what's been entered into evidence so far as State's Exhibit 29 and State's Exhibit 30 in this case. We'll start with State's Exhibit 29. When you say you take cuttings from these items, how big of a hole do you leave?
A small hole
Okay.
around less than a centimeter
And
square.
Can you still see all the holes of the cuttings you took on this exhibit?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to retrieve State's Exhibit 29, and we'll do the same with 30. And can you see the cuttings that you took on this exhibit as well?
Yes. They are small, about a centimeter at the largest.
Thanks for showing us. In addition to this case,
I had access to 2 samples, one from Ariel Konig and one from Gerhardt Konig.
and was Ariel Konig's reference sample labeled as item number 24 under HPD report 25-110958?
Yes.
And was Gerhardt Konig's reference sample listed as item number 45 under HPD report 25-110958?
Yes.
On March 31st, 2025, did you retrieve item 24, Ariel Konig's reference buccal swab sample, as well as item 45, Gerhardt Konig's reference buccal swab sample from the evidence room?
Yes.
Who did you recover them from?
I recovered them from Brenda Monpetit.
How were these reference buccal swabs packaged?
They were received in sealed manila envelopes.
And at the time you received them, how many seals were on each package?
1 seal on each package.
And was each seal signed or initialed?
Yes.
Were any seals broken?
No.
And was item 24 listed in your lab report as 24K1?
Yes.
And was item number 45 listed as 45K1?
Yes.
Okay, so all the swabs or samples we talked about earlier were Q1, Q2. Why are these K numbers?
So the Q was for the question samples, and the K is to indicate that it's from a known individual, a known sample.
And then what kind of test did you perform on these 2 swabs, 24K1 and 45K1?
DNA testing.
Prior to your testing, were the swabs that you signed out from Brenda Montefiore, items number 24 and items 45, in your sole custody and control from the time you withdrew them to the time you tested them?
Yes.
Prior to conducting the testing, while those items were in your control, were they tampered with, altered, substituted, or destroyed in any way?
No.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from item number 24, Ariel Konig's reference sample?
Yes.
Were you able to develop a DNA profile from item number 45, Gerhardt Konig's reference sample?
Yes.
Okay. To follow up on some comparisons you said you made earlier, in which kind of question samples did you compare the question sample with the 2 known reference samples?
So I made comparisons when the question sample was single source or from one individual, and I could make my manual exclusions.
And were your comparisons only limited to exclusions?
Yes,
Okay. So based on your comparison for the sample 2Q1, the stained portion of item 2, the rock, what were your results with the manual interpretation?
for the stain from the rock, Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile obtained.
For item number 4Q1, which is the swab from the swab titled "Stain from Plant Leaf on Trail," what was your conclusion during the manual comparison, again with regards to exclusions?
Same conclusion, Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a contributor to the DNA profile obtained.
All right, swab or sample 5Q1, which was titled "Stain from Tree Branch." What was your result of your manual comparison, again, as it relates to exclusion?
Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a possible contributor to the DNA profile obtained.
Sample number 13Q2. You mentioned that you did do a comparison, and that was the t-shirt stain on exterior right chest, right?
Yes,
Okay, what were the results of your manual interpretation for 13Q2?
Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a possible contributor to the DNA profile obtained.
And lastly, item number 13Q6, titled "Stain on Exterior Back Center." What was the results of your manual comparison, again, as it relates to exclusions?
Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a possible contributor to the DNA profile obtained.
Did I miss any other manual comparisons that you made?
I think there was one more for the shorts.
Oh, okay. So it's item number 14.
Actually, two,
Okay, and that's 14
Q4 and Q5.
Q4 and Q5?
Yes,
So for item number 14, the shorts, sample Q4, titled "Stain on Exterior Front Top Right," what were the results of your manual comparison?
same exclusion, Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a possible contributor to the DNA profile obtained.
And for item 14, the shorts, Q5, for the samples titled "Stain on Exterior Front Middle Right," what was the result of your manual interpretation?
Same exclusion, Gerhardt Konig is excluded as a possible contributor to the DNA profile obtained.
All right, so that is 7 manual comparisons you did? For each of those samples,
Of human blood was positive.
and in all of those samples, were you able to determine questions at this time?
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Amarin.
Good morning.
We've been here a couple hours, and Are you aware that the jury in this case has seen photographs of Ariel Konig's head covered in blood? Have you seen those photographs?
I have not.
Okay, and but your testimony is basically the blood that was swabbed was a female's blood, right? As it relates to the clothing and blood items was female blood, right?
Human blood was positive, yes.
And for female, right?
And yes, and there was a female contributor to some of the results that I presented.
Okay. You mentioned that DNA can be obtained from both bodily fluid and cells, yes?
Yes,
And bodily fluid, saliva, blood, semen, things like that, yes?
yes,
And you mentioned that sometimes cells, microscopic on an object might not be visible to the naked eye, correct?
yes,
But bodily fluid as well could be on something and a human eye may not be able to see it on an object, yes?
it's possible, yes.
So, for example, when it came to the rock, item 2, you mentioned, ma'am, that you took 2 swabs of different areas of the rock, yes?
Yes,
So you took a swab of what you referred to as a stained area on the rock, yes?
correct.
And then you took a swab of an unstained area, correct?
Yes,
But you didn't swab every part of the entire rock, just 2 parts of it, yes?
yes, just those 2 specific areas.
And so you only tested for the presence of bodily fluid or cells from 2 specific areas on the rock, yes?
Yes,
So it's possible that additional parts of the rock that were not tested could have had additional rock, the stained and unstained area, 2 profiles. Yes.